For another edition of the World Edition, and a lot is going on in the world. And of course, we've got a special guest on today as well. So we'll get into a conversation with them in a little bit. But first, let me tell you about some of the things that are taking place in the world. So we can have a conversation about that as well later on in the news report and all in that space. But yes, it definitely looks like Russian warships are seen listed in the Black Sea after the Ukrainian sea drone attacks on a major base. So that is something that we're seeing in that space, and a lot of people are concerned about wheat and the impact of the Russia Ukrainian war on wheat prices and other prices as well. So that is something that we are seeing in the news and all along those lines. And definitely in other parts of the world, civil war is blanketed Yemen in landmines, and children are paying the price. So definitely there is some casualties in that particular case and along those lines. And it looks like in India, Rahul Gandhi is set to return to parliament as the top court suspends his conviction. So that is something that we are seeing in the world as well. And then when it comes back to Russia, it looks like Russia is revising its defense budget plan amid soaring military expenditures. That, according to Reuters, and all along those lines. So that is something that we are also seeing. And Romania has released influencer Andrew Tate from house arrest, awaiting his trial. And in that space. So that is something else that is going on in the world. And anger in China over the flooding of towns, in part to save Beijing. So I guess they flooded the towns in order to save one of their major cities, and all in that kind of a way. And South Korea is spending millions to rescue World Scout Jamboree amid the scorching heat wave that is going on over there. So hundreds of teenagers are falling ill from the heat wave at the World Scout Jamboree in that particular country. And Ethiopia has declared a state of emergency following clashes in Amhara. So that is something else that is taking place in the world and along that kind of space. So a lot of things going on and a lot of things are happening. Let me see what's happening in the U.S. real quick. I know that a lot of people have been paying attention to the Trump indictment as well as other things that are going on. But let's see what else is happening. Texas A&M has reached a $1 million settlement with a journalism professor. So that is after a botched hiring and an internal investigation. So they're going to be paying $1 million to a African American professor in that particular area and all along that kind of style of life and all. But a wife of a alleged Gilgo Beach killer believes her husband was living a double life, according to what her lawyer has said and all in that space. And the College Board is advising Florida schools not to offer AP psychology courses. So Florida is definitely doing some stuff in the realm of trying to figure out what courses to offer and what courses not to offer, and all in that space. And these animals just keep attacking folks, and all in that kind of way. We talked about the otter that was terrorizing folks in California. Well, there's a wild otter attack that left 3 women hurt, including one flown to the hospital in the Montana's Jefferson River. So I guess those otters are not too pleased with us humans and are taking it out on us and in that space. And I'm sure Jatopi and others may have some thoughts about this, because first they attacked us in California, now they're attacking us in Montana. And definitely that is something going on as well. Like I said about Trump, he has pleaded not guilty to the January 6 charges during his arraignment. So definitely that is something that is going on as well. And we'll see whether his supporters stay his supporters or whether some of them bail from him and all along those lines. I'm going to bring my guest, have a conversation with him about a couple of things. One about his book, which is about Appalachia, as well as one of the his background in finance and other things in that space, because he's definitely a financial wizard, from my understanding, and all along those lines. And speaking of which, then maybe I'll ask him some thoughts about this particular story as we bring him in. But a Austrian leader has proposed enshrining the use of cash in his country's constitution, which apparently cash is remaining more popular in the Alpine nation than in many other places. So Chancellor Karl Nehammer said in a statement on Friday that more and more people are concerned that cash could be restricted as a means of payment in Austria. His office said that uncertainty is fueled by contradictory information and reports. People in Austria have a right to cash, Nehammer said, while payments by card and electronic methods have become increasingly dominant in many European countries. Austria and neighboring Germany remain relatively attached to cash. The government says 47 billion euros per year are withdrawn from ATMs in Austria, a country of about 9.1 million people. So, like I said, I am going to bring in our special guest and all along those lines. And I do know that he comes from the world of finance and all in that space. He also has written a book about his time growing up in the Appalachians, and there is some myths about the Appalachians. Some people think of the Appalachians as being hillbilly country and all in that kind of way. So before we get to the book, I definitely wanted to hear some of your thoughts around finance, because I also know that you are a finance person as well. So is this something we're going to see more people trying to protect their cash in the way that the Alpines country has done? Because I know a lot of people, even here in the U.S., they love their credit cards. They love their other ways of spending and not necessarily good old-fashioned dollars and everything. But I had never heard of a country putting it into their constitution till I saw this article. And I was like, I got a finance guy coming on. I should ask him about that before we get to our book and everything. So what is your thoughts about this? And will this be a trend that we see?
Yeah, I think just having cash in your pocket for generations, having a little cash in your pocket is a it's a good feeling, and I think people want to be able to use cash no matter what country that you're in. The restrictions just on freedoms like that are a little concerning, but I just think cash is an important part of society. Goes along with our credit cards, the ability to use an ATM card to get cash out of a bank anywhere in the world is pretty phenomenal. And privacy issues come into play as well. That when you have cash, there's nobody looking over your shoulder. You can purchase what you want without having anybody looking. But I just think it goes back. I know for me, just having some cash in my pocket gave me comfort. And mainly because I didn't have any money when I was young. But that's my thought on it, is cash is always going to be important. Hopefully it'll still be important, not be forced to go away.
Yep. And so you're saying cash is king and cash will be remaining king and all along those lines. Tell us a little bit about your own background, because like I said, I do know that you have that financial background. I think there's a little bit of legal background as well. And I know that you're from an area that actually our founder knows quite well, because Nick is of the Mormon faith. So he definitely knows about Utah, and actually his business is based in Utah as well. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about you, and I'm sure Nick may be joining us as well as some of the other panelists. So if you just tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, appreciate that, Mark. My office, which is in my home here, is in Salt Lake City, but I actually grew up in a little town in eastern Ohio. It's in the I call it the northwest part of Appalachian. You mentioned hillbilly. You're talking to a hillbilly here, so that's my background. I grew up, not all Appalachian people are poor and have a single parent, that stereotype that's there. Great people, in all of Appalachia, which is it goes from New York all the way down to Georgia. Where I grew up, it's near West Virginia, near Kentucky, but I kind of fall into that, if you will, stereotype, I guess. I grew up incredibly poor. My dad wasn't around very much at all. I was raised by my mother, like I say, very, very poor. And about 11 years ago, I had my first grandchild was born. And I remember sitting in the hospital thinking, what do grandfathers do? I mean, I have 5 children myself. I had learned on-the-job training, if you will, about being a father, but I didn't know anything about being a grandfather. Both of my grandfathers, by the way, were killed, died in the coal mines in the late 20s and mid 30s. So I had zero men in my life. And so, the book is one where I was thinking about my granddaughter, my first grandchild. What do I say? What do I do for this child to help them grow in a very complex world, much more complex than I grew up and you grew up in? And so I started taking notes about lessons that I learned growing up in Appalachia, the important lessons. And some of those important lessons you might think are very minor, very simplistic, but they're important nonetheless. So I started showing my family and some people, some coworkers about these notes, and they said, "Jan, this is pretty cool. You should really write a book and maybe put it out there." So it took me 11 years. The book's been out for about 6 months. You can get it on Amazon. It's on iTunes and Audible as well. But writing a book, as I found, is much more difficult than I ever thought it would be. But I think it's the lessons in that book are very important in today's world. And it's just about overcoming adversity. Adversity hits everybody in our lives at various times, some serious, some not so serious, but adversity will come to you. And it's about surrounding yourself or finding those mentors and those people, good people, because there's some people you don't want to be around, but it's important to find good people to put yourself around that cares about you and has your best interest at heart. I spent 12 years in the military, which was an incredible help to me as a senior in high school. I knew I needed something. The military experience is in the book. My wife of almost 39 years she changed my life, honestly. And so the book is really about taking myself as a poor little kid in Ohio and in Appalachia with, no men around. I should be a statistic, honestly, very poor. And now I live on a mountain here in Salt Lake City area. And how did I get there? And that's what this book does.
Jan, along those lines, I definitely love for our folks to know the title of the book and all in that kind of way. But a lot of conversation has been going on around the division in America, whether that's folks that are on the Trump-Biden camp, if you want to go in politics, or whether that's around the racial lines and a number of other lines. And a lot of the division, I would argue, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, is just as much class-based as it is race-based, and meaning that there's a lot of class division that is going on, and a lot of folks are suffering in this particular time because of the vast difference between those that are very wealthy and those that are very poor, including some of those that are in the Appalachian area and all along those lines. But I'd love to hear your take on that, and how much do you think class is playing a part, and what can we do to narrow that class divide?
Mark, I think that is a very insightful question. I have thought about this. I am one, looking back when I was a teenager, as I mentioned, I had, and even, as a young kid, there were classes, right? There's the upper class, middle class, lower class. My family for generations were in the lower class. And I grew up thinking, my mother grew up thinking, and she told me that. She said, "Jan, you're in the lower class, right? That's our destiny, if you will." And it's very difficult for a guy like you, Jan, to move from the lower class. Even, the people that you associate with, middle and upper class, it was an issue, had no confidence. But there is, it's an important topic, because many people in lower classes, no matter your race, anything like that, some people don't know how to rise above. They don't know the opportunities. They don't have mentors. They don't have educational opportunities. At least they don't think they have those. And just not knowing what to do and feeling hopeless is a very limiting factor. There is opportunity and there is hope. There are many, and I try and do this myself, is to help those understand here's the opportunities in your life. One of the things that I had to overcome for myself is I think the word is worthiness. No religion in that. It's just worthy as a human being. Am I worthy to be more than I am? And I think a lot of people struggle with that happiness. But rising above to other classes is important. I think there are governmental areas that can be done that aren't being done. I think there is, the government spends an incredible amount of money. It's, in the trillions, and it's a lot of it's bureaucratic. It's not focused where it needs to be. At the end of the day, Mark, it's all about people. Doesn't matter your race or anything. You wake up in the morning and you treat people good. It doesn't matter your social class. You go out there and you find good people and surround yourself with them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely agree with you on that. And speaking of good people, I'm gonna bring in some of my associates as well. I was curious because I do know that the book has Appalachian in the title and everything. So, what are some of those stereotypes that you have faced even growing up and everything? Because when I think of Appalachians, I'll hate to admit it, and I'm going to date myself. A lot of people will automatically think of, I'm going to mention 2 TV shows, Green Acres and the Beverly Hillbillies, because both of them were based in that Appalachian kind of culture and everything. But what is those other stereotypes that even you yourself have faced, whether you've been there in Utah or in other parts of the world as well?
Yeah, it's not, I haven't had any issue out here in Utah. I moved here 10 years ago, and, it was a great experience to live here. I just love it here. But my home is in Zanesville, Ohio. It's who I am. It's in my blood. It's in Appalachia. I think it was, I wasn't invited to a lot of, when I was in high school, wasn't invited to a lot of, events, student events, parties, things like that. I was alone a lot. And I think, just an assumption would be, I didn't have social class. I didn't have a dad to help me. I tried to go into football. I thought I was, and still think so, not so much anymore, but think I was a pretty decent athlete. I could catch a football, but I had zero support. And I think people looked at me, some teachers, coaches looked at me, and they just didn't know what to do with this guy. Didn't have a dad to support me. And it was kind of a lonely upbringing. And my mother worked all the time. So there were those subtle stereotypes, but, the way I looked at it as I got a little older is like, nothing's going to change unless it's within me. I'm the one that has to change. And, I got a little fire inside of me and just took off. And I took off not knowing what to do, but found some people to help me.
To Toby and Lee, and I see, Lee, you've got on your hillbilly hat today.
I couldn't help myself pulling this out of the closet today. Seems like Jim and I have a lot in common.
I like it.
Thank you. It's not really a New York hat, but it fits me from where I come from.
Yeah.
So any questions that y'all have and everything? And like I said, the book, and I was going to bring that up as well, and everything has a very nice title. I think it's called Searching for Change, an Appalachian Life, a Memoir. So that is actually the title of the book, and it definitely takes the reader on a journey of Jan's upbringing there in the Appalachian area, and even some of what he's talked about going through some of those sorrow parts, whether it was being there in the steel mills and the coal mills. And the mural I paint is vivid of life in this unique and beautiful region. So he says, definitely, whether you're from the Appalachia yourself or simply curious about this misunderstood part of the country, you're hoping that the story will speak to the audience and all in that kind of way. So what are some of those misunderstandings that you think people have of the Appalachians? I mentioned the poverty. I know that unfortunately Steve is not here, but Steve, who is one of our regular anchors and all in that space, is from West Virginia. I think he has some coal mining background. And I know that Maxine also has some coal mining background, and she does a show every Monday evening at around 7 o'clock and everything. So we do have some folks that are associated with that area. But what are some of those misconceptions that you think people have about the Appalachia?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, for you.
Yeah. So I think a lot of misunderstanding is, I see this a lot in the media or whatever. Anytime you're talking about Appalachia, especially like in West Virginia, Kentucky, and those areas, you've got, you've got overalls, no shirt under it, bad teeth, all of those stereotypes. And those people, or, that report on these issues, need to travel through there. It is an incredibly beautiful area of the country, made up of great people. There are smart people, there are educated people that are in there. Appalachia does have its poorer areas. It has areas that need a lot of help. It has people that don't have a lot of hope in it. But that's a subsection, and those people need help. But Appalachia is much more than that.
Yeah.
I just got a quick question for Jan. Because of the poorness and where it is, has a fentanyl crisis or a drug crisis in general hit it as much as the coastal cities?
It's been much more. It's been much worse in Appalachia. The statistics, some of these are in my book. The statistics of drug use are higher than the national average. The poverty rate in general is higher than the national average, and I think it's a kind of a symptom of the hopelessness that a lot of people feel in some of those areas. But it is much higher.
Well, along those same lines, and I know that Joey may have some thoughts as well, and Nick was here earlier, but one of the reasons that this whole Pod TV network was founded was that both Nick and Kim have expressed a concern that we don't teach enough about fiscal responsibility and fiscal literacy and along those kind of things in our school system. And I know that you come out of the world of commercial finance and all of that, but you also do a lot of work in terms of teaching financial literacy and economics to adults, as well as to the students in junior high and high school there in your community in Utah. And I'm sure you even did it back in Appalachia as well. So what is your thoughts about this? Is this a concern that you have also, and what can we do to change that concern on a national and even an international level? Because there's probably part of the reason that you even went into banking is to help people better themselves and all along those lines.
Yes, Mark, another great question and topic. There is a significant problem I know in the United States, probably elsewhere, but with young people not knowing finance. They don't know math as well as they need to know math. It is a significant issue. I think for example, you hear high schools, it seems like today there's so many things being taught except for the important things, science and math and history and art and things like that. Math is used every day in people's lives. No matter if you want to or not, it's everywhere. And you got to know what you're doing from a economic, finance, just basic math. I'll tell you a quick story. I relate this in the book, or I mention this in the book. I avoided math in high school with every ounce of my being, and I graduated not knowing much about math. And then when I decided to go to college, it was a problem. I had to go back to 7th grade math and just kind of learn math. But before I went to college, I was in I worked in a pizza shop. I was hired as an assistant manager, and in the back of the room, and I was newly married, by the way, brand new married. I think by that time my wife was pregnant with our first son. And it was the store closed the first night, and there was a sheet of paper that I had to fill out, and it was just, sales for the day, there were some ratios in there. And I sat down and I looked at that paper and I couldn't do the math. And I sat in the back of that Pizza Hut or pizza shop in that little desk and cried because I'm married and I can't do this basic, simple math. And it was at that moment I just said, Jan, you have a lot of change that you need to make. And these are things that come up. It's very limiting in your opportunity in life. If you don't know basic math, you don't understand how to solve a problem. And I'm trying to do my little part to spread that around. But Mark, you're right. It's an issue and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. Jacoby, I don't know if you've got any questions. I'm going to bring Sasha Starr out of Canada up. And of course, he's been following the Ukrainian-Russian situation. He's got his show coming up at 11 o'clock as well. And Jacoby, as you're thinking of any questions that you may have, and I bring Sasha up, the other question I had for you, Jan, is what made you, because you just mentioned you didn't have much of a background in finance and definitely in math and everything, but what was it that pushed you to go into the world of finance and particularly corporate finance? Because I know that can be a very difficult field, because I do know that that's oftentimes involved some of these office buildings that are going up, as well as some other things when you're talking about commercial finance and all along those lines. So what got you to even think that this was a career that you wanted to go into?
Well, Mark, you're on it today. So it was a great question. What intrigued me about it is a couple of things. When I was, first, when I was very young, my mother, she was a bank teller at one point in her young life. And she would sit me down, not a lot to do, didn't have any money, but she would sit me down. And we had this game we played, and we just called it, hey, let's play bank. And she would teach me how to count money back. If somebody purchased something, count the change back, and there was a proper way to do it. We made money out of, just pieces of paper and crayons, and she would teach me how to make bank transactions. And it got my brain kind of in that mode, if you will. The second thing is, the first job I ever had was I was 9 years old and I worked in a laundromat out in a little shopping center in Zanesville. And in those days, they didn't have, change machines. And so my mother convinced the owner of the laundromat to hire me as a change boy. And I wiped down the machines. But I had all of these stacks of bills and change in front of me. And I got used to that. I got used to feeling money and feeling the cash and counting it to the customers that needed quarters and things. And I think it just triggered something in my mind that I don't have any cash and other people do. And how do I learn about business and finance? And so I'm an Ohio State grad. They took a poor kid and got him into that university, and I graduated with a degree in finance, and I've worked in the banking business for 31 years, 32 years, and I have my own company now, but I learned a lot, met a lot of businesses, good and bad, and learned to problem solve. The type of commercial finance that I do is a subset. It's a little more difficult, called asset-based lending, and it's really for companies that have higher leverage and cash flow issues. And asset-based lending banking officers need to roll their sleeves up and work with these companies, large and small, to figure out a way forward. And I like that. And so that's the origins, and that's what I do to this day.
Hey, along those same lines, I just wanted your thoughts about this and everything. Then Sasha and Jacoby may have a question as well. You just mentioned that you went to Ohio State, the Ohio State, as folks like to say, that went to that school and everything. But that being said, there's been a whole conversation around people getting breaks because of their background and things along those lines. And I do know for a fact that one of those dividing factors isn't always racially motivated. It is sometimes also class motivated. So there are people that are able to get into college because they are able to get scholarships or loans or other things because of their class situation. I know that the university that I went to, the EOP program, was partially based on race, but it was also partially based on the class issue as well. So a number of people that went into the Education Opportunity Program were those from a poor background, whether from New York or whether from Tennessee or Mississippi or wherever they came from. So how important was that to your own education, and how important do you think that is for getting people out of poorer situations? Because there's been attacks against some of those programs, and I'll just leave it at that. But what is your take as a product of that?
Yeah, the poorness, my economic background, where I come from, it really didn't factor in. Like they didn't even know, except what they did know is my grades were terrible in high school. My ACT score, I won't even tell you my ACT score. It is incredibly embarrassing and low. So they didn't care. What they did care about is, what are you going to do, Jan, that you need to do to get into this university? And they declined me. I sent my application in to Ohio State. I got a letter back saying, Jan, no, you're not able to get here and enroll just because you don't have the grades. But they did give me one thing, and that was the opportunity to prove myself. And that they said, however, as this is at the bottom of the letter, if you go to this branch campus of Ohio State, it was in a nearby city, it was a small branch, take remedial math, remedial English, all those things you're supposed to know in high school. You do those things, and if you can prove yourself for 1 year that you can do this, then we'll reconsider. So I said, whatever I got to do. So I went into that branch campus, spent a year, got decent grades while working and taking care of. I had 2 kids then at the time, and after a year, I resubmitted my application, and they said, "Okay, you did your thing." One thing that my economic background helped me with is I was able to get a Pell Grant, and I think a lot of young people still get Pell Grants. I got a Pell Grant, and at the time there was an Ohio, I can't remember the name of it. There was an Ohio like opportunity grant, a little bit of money, not a lot. The military helped me. They paid like 60% of my tuition. So, my thinking at the time was, number one, with myself, I'm going to do everything I can for myself to get through this. And then below that, I'll get as many grants as I can. And I got the Pell Grant and the Ohio Grant. Then below that came the military help, which I was so grateful for. And then finally, I filled in anything that was left with student loans. And I tried to keep that student loan as small as possible, but I still needed it. Very important, but it's important to manage it, keep it as low as possible. And I worked my guts out at the same time. So that's how I did it. And my wife was incredibly helpful, supportive. She had a job, and we just tried to keep things together while we were going through that college year or years.
Sasha or Jacoby, any questions? I know that Sasha comes out of the world of finance. He does a show called Modern Investing in addition to the chess show and the Ukraine-Russia show and all along those lines, but definitely he might even do some stuff around asset management and some of those things that you delve into. I'm not sure whether he does or not, but he can tell you what his experience is with various finance and financial kind of experiences are. I'd rather him do that than myself. If you've got any questions for you around finance, since you are in that corporate finance space, or if Jacoby's got any questions, and Jacoby comes out, well, he's setting up a nonprofit now, but also comes out of esports and sports commentating, commentates on the field activities for both the Bulls and the Carolina Hurricanes, which are 2 of our teams here in North Carolina and everything.
Yeah. I have my own thoughts, but just current economic conditions, interest rates, deficits. What are your panel's thoughts on those things, if any?
On deficits or what specifically what?
Well, specifically, let's start with the deficit. How does the deficit? Do you think the deficit is going to hinder economic growth in the future? I read yesterday, it might have been the day before, that just the interest on the debt will be a trillion with a T this year.
I think it's totally irresponsible. Federal government to run a debt up like that. Do you disagree?
No, it's very irresponsible to do that. But I was just curious of your thoughts about how that balloons out and affects the economy and jobs and interest rates and so on.
Anyone else want to go in on this one, or otherwise I'll keep talking?
I mean, I've got one here who's wanting to talk in the background, so I've been on mute the whole time. So,
Jacoby, speaking of the one you have in the background, do you think it's fair for the next generation that we, rack up all this debt that they're going to have to repay, or their grandkids?
Well, I think it's unfair that we politicize it, because I think it is. It has always and will always be an issue, regardless of whatever age group or whatever generation, because we have a growing society. And what are our plans? Are we planning on cutting health benefits for kids like mine?
Those are all fair questions, but there's so many earmarks and waste that should not be in there. But there are programs that start to have sunset provisions, and they're still funding them.
But that's not really what's being fought over. And those provisions,
it should be. I agree with you.
And those provisions really aren't fought over, because a lot of them really are very minuscule in comparison to actually what's being spent. For example, the military budget, healthcare, and so on and so forth. Those are the ones being fought over, because those are big parts of the budget. And those things are not going away. We are not in a world where we can just say, let's cut all of our military spending and we'll be safe. Let's cut all of our healthcare benefits and we'll be healthy. Those are the things that we retire. Social Security, we fight over all the time. Well, we're borrowing against Social Security to pay for other things. And we're not adjusting the Social Security benefit or Social Security age limits and so on and so forth, or actually economic limits, taxes. We're arguing over taxes when we know that our taxes are paying for these things, but yet we want to say, well, we should cut taxes so much that we can't pay for these things. And now the whole mantra behind the GOP is the star of the beast. The whole mantra behind the Democrat Party is, well, the notion that's put out there that's really not the actual thing that's happening is that they want to give money away. Well, it's not really giving money away. The middle is we have to figure out a balance, because that deficit's never going anywhere. We just got to figure a way to navigate that deficit. We, in our individual lives, we have credit card debts that we're never going to fully pay off that credit card debt. We're always going to have it. It's just, we use credit cards. We use cash. We work to pay our bills. So it's not that we will never have bills anymore. That light man still.
We're always going to have bills, but to say just rack up credit card debt at 22%, that's not probably the most responsible thing to do.
We have not responsible and everything. I want to get back to Jan, and actually had a question for him based on y'all's whole back and forth conversation. There is, and Sasha may have some thoughts around this as well. There is a mythology that goes out there, and I'll just explain it. It comes in both the race conversation, but I would also argue it comes in regional conversations. There are some people out there that if you say that you are from the Appalachian area, they automatically assume that you are of the Republican background and everything. And I know for a fact that the Appalachians is diverse and not everybody is a Republican. Don't know your own political allegiances or everything. But is that something that you have also run across when you have studied and done your book, is that there is a notion that, like racial groups and ethnic groups, that everybody is monolithic and that they are all thinking the same way? Because I sometimes think that people have that mentality, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, Jan.
Oh yeah, a couple things. It is very diverse. From my own state of Ohio, you have sections of the state. If you recall, in past elections, Hasn't been so much recently, but if a presidential candidate won Ohio, they won the presidency, and that went back for years and years. Now, that didn't happen this past election, but the reason they say, or analysts, political analysts say that Ohio is that state to watch is because it is so diverse. You have the northeast part in Cleveland, very blue collar, very blue collar. You have the southwestern part of the state that, Cincinnati, in those areas tend to be a more conservative. And then everywhere in between, in my little town of Zanesville, Ohio, you get diverse opinions. It's almost 50-50, political affiliations and things like that. Back to the comment, though, I have pretty strong opinion about the deficits and hey, there's always going to be a deficit. Here's the problem. The problem is the debt, every bit of deficit each year gets added on to the national debt. The national debt is such a monumental amount. Just the interest alone this year is projected to be $1 trillion. That doesn't go to pay for health care. It doesn't go to help anybody. It goes to interest. It doesn't pay any principal. That cannot go on. Eventually, I don't know when, but if those types of deficits continue, inflation will continue to grow because the only way to pay is to print dollars. You get to a point where you can't borrow much anymore. And I might add that the first time in a long time, the country's credit rating by Fitch was just reduced from AAA to AA+. That is a huge sign that there's something terribly wrong.
Well, Jan, just to talk on the downgrade was done because of political strife and the unwillingness for both parties to work together, and not based on what's going on with our interest rates or anything like that. Because the economy itself, we know based on statistics, and you can agree with, we are where without the spike in inflation that happened, and inflation is a global thing and not just a policy thing local, the spike in inflation, without that spike in inflation, we are at a point now where the inflation was actually rising naturally. So we have gone up and come straight back down. And then on top of that, all economic, the majority of economic signs that many economists have been using to say the economy is strong, the economy is this. I mean, we've avoided a recession. The stock market is high. The unemployment rate is low. The wages are technically increasing. So they're strong economic. There's a strong economic outlook. But the problem is we still have, yes, our deficits are high, but our deficits are always going to be there. And then if we talk about things that we need to cut, why do we never look at the corporate welfare? However, we look at the welfare that helps the individuals in Appalachia, in the poor communities, and we say that is what's harming us, when that is a drop in the bucket compared to the corporate welfare that's out there.
Yeah, and you made a comment earlier about it shouldn't be political. It should not be political. This is not to me, it's not a political issue. The what you see throughout the economy with the inflation, at the ultimate source, inflation is caused by printing of too many dollars, and it went around the country, or it went around the world. A lot of governments were printing during the pandemic. But you mentioned it shouldn't be political. I'm a problem solver. I look at things, does there have to be these deficits? No. I say no. Do you have to cut things to, just like on the surface cut? No. What you do is you get in and you look at things at their source. Are there better ways to do things? I was talking to my daughter the other day my youngest daughter, and she just graduated from college with her accounting degree. And she was asking me, she said, we were talking about Social Security, and she said, I didn't know, like, if you die and you're not married or anything, and you could pay into Social Security in a long time, you lose that money, right? You don't get much of a benefit from it. Many of these government programs were produced in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and have never been looked at. Are they effective? Is there a better way? Can you take all of these dollars in Washington, D.C., trillions of dollars, and why do we need this huge bureaucracy when you can look at a better way to do things, save a lot of money, get rid of a lot of waste, and put these programs with the states? Appalachia is much different than Salt Lake City, and you're never gonna solve. There's not going to be a program that fully takes care of all of the regions in the country because they're so diverse and so different. Appalachia needs something totally different than here in Salt Lake City. And being smart about it, being caring, like I say at the beginning when I was here, it's all about the people. Doesn't matter if it's your family, your business, government. It has to be about people and understanding them and making things work. And the whole problem that we have with the government, there's tons of corruption in government, as we all see. It all begins with the government has become so large, so bureaucratic, it can't be controlled. One hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, and there is a much better way. Nobody wants to do it. Nobody has to be without their Social Security, but there's a better way to do it. Nobody has to be without health care, but there is a better way to do it. And there are a lot of smart people out there that could figure this out. But just to say we're always going to have deficits and nothing's going to change is a defeatist attitude to me. We tackle Americans.
So I completely agree that there are better ways to do particular things. Privatizing them for me is not a better way, because privatizing you run into a lot of issues with, how you play the volatile market, and the volatile market, you end up losing more in your savings, and then hey, you retire and you ain't got no money. So
how would you solve that though? I mean, there's a problem. You listed a problem.
So for example,
there's a solution to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there are ideas out there in terms of, for example, raising caps for adding money into Social Security and stuff like that. There are solutions that are all out there. And also there has to be a balance, because yes, completely agree that, and honestly, that's where the earmarks, Lee, that we were talking about earlier. Some of those earmarks are angled towards going to particular places rather than just being, hey, this is a blanket statement. It's all going to go to Salt Lake City and Appalachia and everywhere else the same way. That's hence the reason for earmarks, and that's what's supposed to happen. But that's not happening because, yes, we have a politicization of all the finances and going in and out, and that's a problem. And that's where a lot of the issues come into play more so than anything.
Hey, Jacoby, along those same lines and everything, just really quickly, Sasha's been waiting patiently, and he is the one that has a lot of financial background and everything. So you've been hearing the back and forth conversation. Like I said, Jan does have some financial background as well, but I know you do also. So is there any questions or thoughts that you have, Sasha? Because I don't want to leave you out of the conversation and all in that space. So Sasha, any thoughts and everything about the conversation and any of these proposed solutions, not just here, but around the world?
My message is very clear. It's a waste of time. It's very unproductive to discuss, for example, on a show like this one, the deficit, the healthcare issue, and many others, because there's nothing to be resolved here. Nothing is going to move anywhere. What is productive, though, is to relay a message that in this mess, each individual has to get his brain, his eyes, hands, everything, control it 100%, and use his opportunities to create his own way to enrich his life, and as a goal to become financially independent as soon as possible. And that's the only thing what each individual has to do and take care of it. So financial literacy, it's a great step to accomplish that. So whoever can provide any of the financial advice and the financial education in any way, shape, or form, that would be grateful, a first step in the right direction. My approach is very practical. Is let's see if average American has, say, 50% from what I've learned of American has access only to about $400 cash and nothing else. It's an astonishing number. What I would recommend as a, you can treat it as a joke though, but still, if you have a pretty good credit and you can max all your credit cards and get as many cards as you can and take cash advance from all those cards, open trading account with one of the brokerages, and start building your life. Start do something. And if instead you're gonna sit down or lie down and complain about inflation
Josh,
and healthcare, it's not gonna help it. Yes.
Sasha, what are you going to do when the margin calls start coming in and the market's moving against you, and you got the cash advance 22% knocking at your door?
There are ways that you don't own stocks. No. Other people would own stock. All you do, you just provide some insurance for that, and you're being paid essentially as an insurance company. I have a few friends who are following my strategy. They don't own. They have multi-million dollars investment portfolios. They have zero stocks. They just don't have any stocks. All they do, they sell options like cash secured puts.
Yeah, I understand that. And sometimes your options that you sell, they do get called. Not all the time do they expire worthless. Sometimes and you're out of the money, and then you're short the stock. Am I wrong?
No, no. Well, first of all, you will not short the stock. You will own the stock. If it will be exercised.
Yeah, I understand that. You might have to go buy IBM at 100 when it's really $50.
No. All what's happened is, even if you are exercise, I mean, you can close position anytime anyway. But let's say you are exercise, so your own valuable security, because I would not sell puts on some risky stocks or so on, but I would do that. Say Microsoft, okay? Microsoft, let's see what I've done just a few days ago when Microsoft was 345, 350. I sold September 1st put at 320. I got paid $6. What does it mean? It means that Microsoft will move all the way lower to 320. Or let's move it down to 214. Sorry, 340, okay? So my price of the Microsoft stock will be 314. It's trading now at around 340, 335, 340 or so on. Would I like to buy Microsoft today at this price, like 335, 340? Yes, it's a very promising stock, and in the market, if it's going to rise, it moves much higher. So I would like to have it. But what I'm saying is, no, it's too expensive for me. I would like to buy it for 314. So essentially, I'm putting myself in a position to own the stock if and when it's happening at 314, stock which is trading now at 340, 345, and it was 380 not a while ago or so on. So this way you are paying upfront, you're paid upfront cash, $6, which means $600 for each position.
I understand.
Okay, that's how it works. Okay, I'm not trying to say that there is no risk involved at all. That's not
my point.
But it's calculated risk, it's educated risk. most likely than not, you will end up making money. Even if you will be exercised, you still have an opportunity to own very promising A1 stock, and you can sell then covered calls against it to augment your
Yeah,
earnings.
hold on
But
a second.
Sasha, how do you tell? How do you get that information to trade stocks to a single dad who's working at McDonald's just to cover his bills and can't pay for internet? How does that dad deal with that? Because he can't.
That dad has to listen to my program on Wednesday, which is financial.
This is a plug for Pod TV.
What else to do?
You can listen to that show and everything. That's a good point. Jan, and we're here to wrap up because we actually got to get to the Ukrainian show that Sasha also does on Friday and everything. But to Toby's point, and if you can answer relatively quickly and everything, what is your advice for those that are in a difficult financial situation? Because I hear what Sasha is saying about investing if you've got those kind of resources. But to Toby's point, not everybody has those kind of resources and they don't want to be part of that $400 club, or those folks that can literally have a hard time getting $400, and in some cases they have a hard time getting $50 to pay their bills and all along those lines. So what is your advice to those folks that are struggling and want to better their financial situation?
Oh yeah, this is a great point. So back to the title of my book, Searching for Change. It has two meanings. The first meaning is when I was young, my mother was scrounging to put $1 worth of gas in the car. And she would say, Janny, she called me Janny all the time. We need to look in the couch and in the sofa and find change, search for change to put some gas in the car. Growing up, these people don't know, many people, middle-class people even, don't know high finance. They don't know, stocks, and especially lower class like me, where I grew up, didn't know anything about that. I couldn't even do math. So I'm a simple guy. I'm a people guy. People need to understand and have an understanding of basic finance, that you don't take too much out on your credit card to buy stuff. You don't buy unnecessary things. You don't buy fancy cars when you can't pay for them. And using all of your income for these things like cars and vacations and stuff, that's going to perpetually put you in a bad spot. The greatest comfort that people can have in their lives is a little money in their pocket and some money in their bank account to last 6 months if there's an emergency. I got to tell you, when you're worried about paying the internet, as was mentioned here, buying some food, it limits your thinking because you're constantly in a state of panic or concern that I don't even know if I can pay my rent next month. It's important to be simple and get out of that state with basic thinking and finance. And that means being disciplined with your income, finding better, get an education to get your employment up, to get your income in to a better point, but limit your outflow to things that matter in your life. Get a savings built, sacrifice these fun things for a period of time to give yourself that comfort to live a little better life and build something for the future.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I definitely appreciate it. Jan, I hope that you'll make a return trip. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope that others have watched and learned as well. I was going to tease Toby as we get ready to get out of here, and he can give a little bit of a joke, because I mentioned earlier those attacking otters, and I know that some friends of mine will be like, well, they ought to be doing something, or all along those lines. So that was my bad joke. But what is your joke or thoughts around these otter attacks as we're heading out the door? Because they hit California, now they're hitting Montana. They may be going to Utah next. So I'm afraid, Jan, they may be targeting you next, even though there's not much of a river and everything. But what's your thoughts, Toby, as we get ready to get out of here and get to the Ukraine-Russia show? Because those otters seem to be very mean, and I told you they're one of my favorite animals.
I mean, I did have some jokes, but I didn't know what I was going to use them for. But But I did read an article that we already had the movie Cocaine Bear. Now there is Slaughterhouse, where there's a sloth in a house killing people.
So I guess next it'll be the otter movie. So the otter movie will be coming out next. So they otter be a movie about otters. So that all seems to be where we're heading and everything. Jen, any thought about these attacking otters? And get it out again. If you want to tell folks how they can get in touch with you, that'll be the last thing. And then I'll play the outro and all in that way.
Well, you guys got me afraid now of otters and everything, so I'm going to lock my door out here. But yeah, this has been thoroughly enjoyable. You guys are great. I appreciate you having me on. Anything I can do to help, people, find some happiness in their life. That's the ultimate goal. And again, Searching for Change. Here's the book. Searching for Change. It's you can find it Amazon, Audible, iTunes if you like to listen. So, but you guys, I'm available anytime. I really enjoy these conversations.
Well, hopefully we'll have you make a return trip. We'll be back on this coming Monday or after the weekend and everything. So this is the last one for this week, but we've had some very enjoyable conversation and some enjoyable guests, you being one of those, and we'll definitely, hopefully have you back in the not too distant future. Yeah. So Lee and everybody else, we're going to get on out of here.
Y'all have a good weekend. Take care. God bless.